Back in 2014, I took a contract job as a safety technician in Coober Pedy, South Australia. It's a strange place. Half the town lives underground to escape the heat. The desert stretches endlessly in every direction, and abandoned opal mines outnumber houses 10 to 1. I didn't grow up around mines, but I'd done enough safety audits in remote areas to get by. Most days were boring, measuring air quality, checking for structural instability, making sure some overeager local didn't fall into a shaft from 50 years ago. One mine in particular gave me the creeps. It didn't have a name, just a reference number on an old clipboard in the office. CP113. It was tucked behind a ridge, barely visible from the main road. The locals didn't talk about it much. Every time I asked about it, someone would just shake their head and mutter, "That one's dead." It was my job to check it anyway. I drove out alone one late afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the cracked red earth. The entrance was a jagged opening reinforced with rusting beams. The temperature dropped the moment I stepped inside. The mine was mostly empty. Long narrow shafts carved into the earth, graffiti from decades ago still etched into the walls. At first it was normal, quiet, dusty, old mining gear rusting in the corners. Then I found the footprints, fresh, in the dust, a man's boot prints deep and crisp leading deeper into the mine. No one else was meant to be there. I radioed base, but all I got was static. Not even interference, just dead air. Still, I figured maybe someone was squatting, not unheard of in this part of the world. I followed the prints slowly, torch in hand. They led me down into a lower tunnel. The walls there looked different. The rock was darker and the air felt heavier, like being underwater. The footprints stopped just ahead of a collapsed section. But that wasn't the worst part. I saw someone standing perfectly still in the tunnel, just at the edge of the torchlight, not moving, not speaking, just watching. I called out, "Mate, you alright?" Nothing. I stepped closer, maybe 5 meters away now. The figure didn't move. He was wearing old mining clothes, faded blue overalls, dust-covered boots, and a helmet. But there was no torch, no gear, and his face, what I could see, looked wrong, pale, like clay. No expression, just 2 sunken eyes locked on mine. Then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile, it was too slow, too wide, as if the mouth was remembering how to work. My torch flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, he vanished. I ran, didn't stop until I was out in the heat again, chest heaving. I drove straight back to the office, told my supervisor everything. He didn't laugh, didn't tell me I was imagining it. He just nodded and said, "You're not the first." Apparently, CP113 was shut down in the 70s after a collapse killed 2 men. Only one body was ever recovered. The other was never found. People said he'd been seen wandering down there ever since, quiet, calm, always standing just out of reach. They say the mine doesn't like being forgotten, that when you walk into that lower shaft, time slips a little, that the man stuck down there never left. Or worse, maybe something else took his shape. I never went back. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see him, that face, that smile, standing in the dark where no one should be. And I wonder if he's still waiting, or if he followed me out. I spent a few years living out near Broken Hill, in a town so small the local servo doubled as the post office and the pub. It's out in the kind of country where the sun burns white, the wind carries sand like razors, and every creak of an old windmill at night feels like something watching. That land feels ancient, not just old, but older than people. Out there, it's easy to believe that things have lived in the dust long before we showed up. I worked as a mechanic back then, quiet life. I rented a cottage on a property a few k's out of town, half-fallen fences, dead sheep bones in the scrub, and the kind of silence that gets into your head. The locals never warned me about the place. Not directly. They just gave me that look when I told them where I was living. A kind of cautious, tight-lipped glance, like they knew something I didn't and didn't want to be the one to say it. The cottage backed onto a dry riverbed. There was a broken swing hanging from a twisted old gum tree just beyond the fence. Rope frayed, seat half buried in the dust. I never saw anyone use it, but sometimes, late at night, I'd hear it creak. Like someone was pushing it, slow and steady. I chalked it up to wind. Until one night, the wind wasn't blowing. It was about 2 a.m, hot night, no breeze. I was dozing with the fan rattling near the bed when I heard the creaking. Slow, rhythmic, wood against rope. Then came the laughter, high-pitched, children. I sat up, heart thumping. There were no kids for kilometres. The nearest house was half a day's walk. I turned off the fan and listened. It came again. Soft giggling, whispers like a group of kids hiding just out of sight. I grabbed a torch, pulled on my boots, and stepped outside. The swing was moving, back and forth, no wind, no one there. Then I saw the footprints, small, barefoot, dozens of them in the red dirt, leading from the swing toward the dried-out riverbed. I followed them for maybe 20 metres before they simply stopped. No return trail, no signs of anyone leaving. The next morning, I told old Jimmy at the pub. He paused, looked down at his beer, and finally muttered, "You've heard them, then?" He told me stories, quiet, not looking for attention. In the 1930s, a settlement out there lost a group of children to a dust storm. They'd gone playing by the creek bed and never came back. Some said the wind swallowed them. Others said they wandered into a place they shouldn't have, a place that wasn't meant to be found again. Since then, every few years someone hears them, the creaking, the laughter, footprints that appear and vanish. No one's ever seen their faces clearly. Just outlines in the night, glimpses from the corner of your eye. One bloke tried to follow them years ago, went out after dark with a lantern and never came back. They found his boots near the same swing. Nothing else. For weeks after, I heard them almost every night. Sometimes it was just the creak of the swing. Other times, I'd wake to find small handprints on the outside of my windows. Once, I swear I heard whispering just behind the wall, like someone trying to speak but couldn't quite form words. Eventually, I moved out. Couldn't take the feeling anymore, like I was never alone. I never saw them. Not properly. But I think they saw me, and I think they wanted me to come play. I've always had a soft spot for the Dandenong Ranges, just a short drive from Melbourne. Those towering mountain ash trees, the thick ferns, moss clinging to everything. It's a place that feels alive, almost like it's watching you. Growing up, I'd spend hours wandering the trails, breathing in that earthy smell of damp wood and leaves. But the older locals would always warn me, the forest changes after dark. It's not just the darkness, but something else, something older. They talk about the whistler, not a creature or a ghost in the usual sense. It's a sound, a sharp, eerie whistle that drifts through the trees, especially on cold, still nights. The whistle isn't like any bird or animal. It's almost human, but off somehow like a tune played wrong. Too long, too cold. Some say it's a call, others say it's a warning. Either way, it never brings good news. One weekend, my friend Mitchell and I decided to camp out in the Dandenongs. We wanted to get away from the city and just breathe fresh air for a couple of days. We picked a spot deep in the forest, a clearing surrounded by thick trees, far enough from any track or cabin. The day was perfect. Clear blue skies, the sun filtering through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. We spent the afternoon hiking and exploring old logging roads, joking about ghost stories and local legends. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest grew colder, we set up camp and built a fire. The first few hours were peaceful. We cooked dinner and talked about everything and nothing, the crackling fire our only company. Then, just as the moon slipped behind a thick cloud, we heard it. A whistle. It was faint at first, barely there. I thought it was the wind weaving through the trees, or maybe a bird settling down for the night. But then it came again, clearer, sharper, cutting through the silence. Mitchell stopped mid-sentence and looked at me, his face unreadable in the firelight. The whistle didn't sound like a tune. It was broken, jarring. It had no rhythm, no melody, just a chilling, high-pitched note that seemed to hang in the air longer than it should. We joked nervously, trying to convince ourselves it was someone else out in the forest, maybe some bushwalker messing around. But the whistle didn't stop. It grew louder and closer, yet when we shone our torches into the dark, all we saw were swaying branches and shadows. It was like the sound moved through the trees without disturbing them, like it was coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. The fire flickered violently, casting strange shapes on the trees, and then the wind died suddenly, leaving an eerie stillness. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. The usual night sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of insects, vanished. Mitchell grabbed his torch and swept it across the bush, but the beam only revealed empty trunks and darkness. No one was there, no animals, just the whistle. It wasn't long before the fire started dying down. We tried to light it again, but the matches kept failing. The cold seemed to seep into our bones. That's when we decided to pack up. We didn't want to linger in the open, not with that sound circling us like a predator. But as we moved toward the trail, the whistle followed, not behind us, not ahead, but all around, bouncing off the trees, twisting through the undergrowth. The path which we'd known so well suddenly felt unfamiliar. Trees seemed closer, branches reaching out like fingers. The thick ferns and bushes grew denser, making it harder to move. The forest was closing in. I felt like we were walking through a dream, or a nightmare. At one point, Mitchell stopped dead, frozen. "I can't see the moon anymore," he said quietly. The night had grown darker than it should have, thick with fog rolling in like a tide. The whistle was louder now, more insistent. We kept walking, step by careful step, until finally the forest thinned and we saw the distant glow of town lights. The whistle stopped abruptly. Neither of us spoke much on the way back. We just wanted to get home, to somewhere safe and bright. Later I found out that the whistler has been part of Dandenong folklore for generations. Some say it's the spirit of a bushranger who was killed and never found rest. Others believe it's an ancient protector of the forest, warning those who would harm the land to stay away. Whatever it wasn't friendly. Sometimes, when the wind is just right and the night is still, I swear I can hear that whistle drifting through the trees, not far from where we camped. It's a sound that stays with you, a reminder that some parts of the bush have secrets that don't want to be disturbed, and some sounds are better left unheard. I was working as a seasonal park ranger near Lake Eildon in Victoria. It's a beautiful spot, calm water, towering gums, and plenty of quiet camping spots. Most days it's peaceful, but the locals warn about certain parts of the lake after dusk. There's a patch along the northern shore called Wombat Point. It's popular during the day, but after dark people say the water plays tricks on you. You get this strange fog rolling in that doesn't look like fog, more like mist made of shadows. My mate Luke and I were doing a late patrol one summer evening. The sun was dipping behind the hills, turning the sky a dusty orange. We were driving slowly along the dirt track near the water's edge when Luke spotted something. "Hey, do you see that?" he asked, nodding toward the lake. At first I thought it was a boat. There was a faint glow on the water, almost like lanterns bobbing on the surface. But as we got closer, it didn't make sense. The glow moved, but not with the wind or waves. It floated in the air, just above the waterline. We stopped the ute, switching off the engine. The glow faded, then flickered back, this time brighter, almost inviting. Luke got out and grabbed the torch. The beam swept over the water but didn't catch anything. No boat, no people, just the mist, rolling, curling, hiding something. That's when we heard it. Voices, soft, distant, like laughter and whispers mixing in the fog. Not loud enough to make out words, but enough to make your skin crawl. I told Luke we should get back, but before we turned around, the mist thickened fast. It was like driving into a cloud that swallowed sound and light. Our radios died. The engine sputtered. The ute stalled. We were stuck. Luke swore he saw figures walking on the lake's surface, like people floating just above the water, their faces blurred and pale. Then, out of nowhere, a woman appeared on the shore, glowing faintly in blue. She wore old clothes, maybe from the 1920s or earlier. She didn't say anything, just stared at us with empty eyes. I slammed the starter again. The engine roared back to life and we sped off, the mist chasing us for a good kilometre before fading. Back at camp, we checked the records. Apparently decades ago, a ferry capsized near Wombat Point, drowning several passengers. The area was closed for a while, but reopened once the lake was dammed and expanded. Locals say those who linger too long near the shore after dark sometimes see her, the Lady of the Lake. Some say she's searching for someone she lost. Others say she's warning people away. Luke never went back near that part of the lake. Me? I don't blame him. There are places where water holds memories, where it hides more than just reflections, and sometimes when the fog rolls in just right, you can see the past reaching out. I was working as a seasonal park ranger near Lake Eildon in Victoria. It's a beautiful spot, calm water, towering gums, and plenty of quiet camping spots. Most days it's peaceful, but the locals warn about certain parts of the lake after dusk. There's a patch along the northern shore called Wombat Point. It's popular during the day, but after dark people say the water plays tricks on you. You get this strange fog rolling in that doesn't look like fog, more like mist made of shadows. My mate Luke and I were doing a late patrol one summer evening. The sun was dipping behind the hills, turning the sky a dusty orange. We were driving slowly along the dirt track near the water's edge when Luke spotted something. "Hey, do you see that?" he asked, nodding toward the lake. At first I thought it was a boat. There was a faint glow on the water, almost like lanterns bobbing on the surface. But as we got closer, it didn't make sense. The glow moved, but not with the wind or waves. It floated in the air, just above the waterline. We stopped the ute, switching off the engine. The glow faded, then flickered back, this time brighter, almost inviting. Luke got out and grabbed the torch. The beam swept over the water but didn't catch anything. No boat, no people, just the mist, rolling, curling, hiding something. That's when we heard it. Voices, soft, distant, like laughter and whispers mixing in the fog. Not loud enough to make out words, but enough to make your skin crawl. I told Luke we should get back, but before we turned around, the mist thickened fast. It was like driving into a cloud that swallowed sound and light. Our radios died. The engine sputtered. The ute stalled. We were stuck. Luke swore he saw figures walking on the lake's surface, like people floating just above the water, their faces blurred and pale. Then, out of nowhere, a woman appeared on the shore, glowing faintly in blue. She wore old clothes, maybe from the 1920s or earlier. She didn't say anything, just stared at us with empty eyes. I slammed the starter again. The engine roared back to life and we sped off, the mist chasing us for a good kilometre before fading. Back at camp, we checked the records. Apparently decades ago, a ferry capsized near Wombat Point, drowning several passengers. the area was closed for a while but reopened once the lake was dammed and expanded. Locals say those who linger too long near the shore after dark sometimes see her, the Lady of the Lake. Some say she's searching for someone she lost. Others say she's warning people away. Luke never went back near that part of the lake. Me? I don't blame him. There are places where water holds memories, where it hides more than just reflections, and sometimes when the fog rolls in just right, you can see the past reaching out. Back in the late 1990s, I was working in forestry near Tasmania's Midlands Highway, not far from Campbelltown. It was remote country, thick with eucalypts and ancient forests, the kind of place where the silence is absolute and the air feels heavy. People come here to work the land or disappear into the bush. I'd been on plenty of long shifts driving narrow dirt tracks, but one stretch I learned to avoid, and not because of the terrain. We called it the Phantom Track. There was never a real name for it. It wasn't on any official maps, but it appeared sometimes on GPS units, as if glitching into existence. The older workers swore it was more than a glitch. Some said it was a forgotten convict road. Others thought it was something older, even older than Tasmania itself. The story I remember best is about Robert Harris. He was one of the quieter blokes in the crew. Steady, no fuss, good with machines. One afternoon, he didn't show up for the check-in call. That wasn't unusual for people who went off-grid to clear patches or survey the forest. But when he didn't return after 3 days, the whole camp went on alert. They found his ute parked near the old water tower, keys in the ignition, doors locked. No sign of him. Days later, Robert staggered back into camp. He looked like a man who'd been dragged through the scrub for weeks. His shirt was torn, dried mud caked on his boots. His face was sunburnt and gaunt, eyes wild and distant. When we tried to get answers, he kept repeating the same phrase over and over. It wasn't there. It wasn't there. We thought he might be delirious or suffering from exposure. The medics ran tests, but he was physically sound, just shaken. Eventually, he started to describe what happened. He said he was doing a survey run, trying to reach a remote stand of old growth near the boundary of our area. His GPS, usually reliable, started flickering. It gave him a route he hadn't seen before, a narrow, overgrown dirt track winding deeper into the bush. The track was flanked by old, moss-covered stone walls, almost hidden by vines and ferns. It felt out of place, like something from another era. Robert said he followed it because it looked like a shortcut, but the deeper he went, the more unnatural it felt. The usual sounds of birds and insects disappeared. No wind through the leaves, not a single rustle. The forest felt dead. He noticed strange markings on trees along the road, not like anything official. No survey marks, no signs. Just strange symbols scratched into the bark, angular, sharp, almost like some ancient script. He said they gave him an uneasy feeling, like the trees themselves were warning him to turn back. When he tried, the track seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting back on itself. He swore the trees moved when he wasn't looking, bending and shifting shadows in impossible ways. At some point he blacked out. He couldn't say how he got free, only that he woke near the highway, dehydrated and disoriented. What really freaked us out was the search. We tracked his footprints leading from the old water tower, through the underbrush, about 9 kilometres in, and then they just stopped. No sign of where he went, no footprints leading away, nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. After Robert's return, a few others tried to find the track, but all they found were faint tyre marks, stone walls crumbled by time, and a feeling of being watched. The GPS and compasses acted up too. Radios lost signal, phones died. We never figured out what that track was. And honestly, after Robert's story, no one wanted to find out. He left Tasmania soon after. Never spoke about it much again. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I think about what he saw or didn't see. Some roads weren't meant to be driven. Some tracks don't belong on any map, and sometimes when the forest goes completely silent, that's when you know you're not alone. You ever been out past Coober Pedy? Not the tourist tracks or opal mines, they're fine. I'm talking way out, beyond the dugouts and the roadhouses, where the land goes flat and white, like someone spilled flour over the world and forgot to sweep it up. That's where it happened. This story didn't come from some backpacker or bored miner. It came from Robert, a tough old prospector who never drank, never joked about the bush, and never, ever told stories. Until one night, a few of us were sitting around a fire outside Marla, and he started talking. Said he'd gone out to an old stretch of salt pan, chasing a rumour about a hidden opal scene. He was alone, like always. Had his four-wheel drive, a couple jerry cans, and a battered pickaxe. Left before dawn, was supposed to be back by nightfall, but he didn't come back for 2 days. When he finally showed up, he was white as the salt flats themselves. Wouldn't say a word for hours. Just sat there shivering under the August sun. Then, like something cracked inside him, he started talking. Quiet at first, like he was afraid someone or something might still be listening. Said he found tracks out there, not his own, not boots, something bigger, deeper. Wide, rounded prints in a perfect arc across the pan, leading nowhere and coming from nowhere. Said he felt watched the moment he stepped near them. Not like an animal watching, worse, older, smarter. He camped nearby that night. Said the air went still, not silent, still, like everything around him had stopped breathing. And then he heard it, this low, rasping sound, like dry leaves being crushed or bones grinding together. It was all around him, but never from one place. The shadows started to move, not with the wind, mind you, but like they wanted him to see them. He tried to leave. Swears he saw tall figures on the salt, skin tied over bone, long arms that scraped the ground, and eyes that gleamed like wet stone. They didn't move fast, just stared, patient, waiting. Robert said he ran until his legs gave out, collapsed under the stars, and stayed there until morning. When the sun came up, the salt pan was smooth, no tracks, no sign of anything, just his own footprints leading back to the four-wheel drive. He won't go back, won't even drive past that part of the Outback anymore. Told us something ancient lives out there, not a ghost, not a spirit, something else. Something that's been there longer than the dirt, just waiting in the silence. He ended his story by looking each of us dead in the eye and saying, "If you ever find footprints out on the pans, don't follow. Doesn't matter how fresh they look. Doesn't matter if they're yours, especially if they're yours." He never spoke of it again, died a few years later. Some say he went mad, but the way he told it, I believe every damn word. People think the territory is just red dirt, heat, and road trains, but out past the roadhouses, beyond the bitumen, there's country you don't go into unless you've got good reason or no choice. I learned that the hard way back in 2009. I was stationed in Tennant Creek then, mid-30s, been in the force over a decade. You get used to isolation, strange calls, weird hours. But this one still doesn't sit right with me. We got a report just after dusk, a ute abandoned on a dirt track about 50 k's east of town. Couple of tourists passing through saw it and called it in. Nothing too unusual. Plenty of folks break down out there. I was the one rostered, so I grabbed the keys, radioed it in, and headed out. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and that kind of desert twilight was settling in, where the light is blue and everything starts to look off. The ute was easy enough to find. Parked half off the track, driver's side door open. It was an older Hilux, no plates, no Rego sticker, just dust and dry grass. No one inside. I called out. Nothing. There were footprints in the dirt, barefoot weirdly. They trailed off into the scrub. I've seen plenty of lost bushwalkers, drunks, or people tripping on something who wander off like this. But something about this was different. No signs of struggle, no supplies taken, no water. I radioed base to update, but got only static. So I followed the tracks a bit, just a few meters, torch in hand. That's when I started hearing something. It wasn't an animal, not footsteps either. It was like breathing. Slow, steady, not mine. I turned back toward the ute. It was maybe 20 meters behind me, except it wasn't. It was gone. I spun around in a panic, torch beam bouncing off trees and dirt. The ute wasn't where I left it. I hadn't heard the engine start. No tyre tracks. It had just disappeared. Now I've dealt with heat stroke, sleep deprivation, but this felt different. Like the bush was watching me, listening. I turned and walked back toward where I thought the road should be. I kept walking. 5 minutes, 10. Still bush. No stars, no moon, just black sky and silence. And then I saw him. A man crouched down in the dirt. He wasn't wearing shoes or a shirt, just old torn jeans and a filthy cloth tied around his neck. His back was to me. "Hey," I called. "Mate, you all right?" He didn't move. I approached slowly, careful, gun still holstered, but my hand was close. When I got within 3 meters, he stood up, slow and shaky, still facing away, and then he turned. His face. Look, I've tried to explain this a dozen times, but I can't make sense of it. It was like he'd forgotten how to be human. His mouth was stretched too wide, eyes too still. No expression, just raw confusion, like a newborn animal. But not afraid, just curious. I backed away, radio in one hand, torch trembling in the other. Then everything went black. The torch died. No sound, no wind, just the smell of metal and burnt dirt. When the light came back, just flickered on suddenly, I was standing next to my cruiser, door still open, engine running. No sign of the ute or the man. Back at the station, I checked the report log. Nothing had been called in. No record of the tourist call, no record of my trip out. I wrote up what I could, left out the details I knew would get me pulled off duty. A few months later, I transferred out. Locals say that track, the one I was on, was used a long time ago by drovers before cattle routes were marked. A few of them vanished out there. Some say they got lost, others say the land took them. All I know is that there are places in the territory where the bush forgets you're a person, and once it does, it doesn't always let you come back.